Welcome back to GHRTV and this week's human rights updates on Europe and the Central Asian country of Kyrgyzstan. On the 16th of January, Kyrgyzstani authorities cracked down on journalists by raiding the offices and homes of 11 journalists who were then taken to the Ministry of Internal Affairs for interrogation. According to the ministry, the mass searches and detentions were part of a criminal investigation into alleged calls for active disobedience and for mass riots, as well as calls for violence against citizens stemming from non-specified content on social media. The actions of the Kyrgyzstani authorities represent an attack on the right to freedom of expression and seriously undermine the country's obligations under international human rights law. Dawn raids on the journalists, detaining them under vague and overly broad charges and denying them access to legal representation, are worrying signs of an escalation in the crackdown on critical voices in Kyrgyzstan, which has fluctuated between authoritarian and democratic forms of government. We now turn to Europe and its ties to Russia.
In spite of Europe's assertion that it has suspended all legal collaboration with Russia in response to its invasion of Ukraine, certain European nations are poised to repatriate individuals who sought refuge from persecution in Russia's North Caucasus, returning them to the very location where those abuses took place. A report by Amnesty International said that the authorities in a number of European countries, including France, Germany, Poland, Croatia, and Romania have tried to send back refugees or asylum seekers who had fled persecution in the North Caucasus. Activists say right abuses, including torture, arbitrary detention, and enforced disappearance, are rampant, particularly in Chechnya, with the situation dramatically worse since Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022. Respect for human rights is one of the EU's founding values, but there remains areas where the EU's attitude and actions regarding human rights are lacking. The EU has often prioritized trade, economic and political ties at the expense of human rights, and failed to exert sufficient diplomatic pressure on states in the Persian Gulf, China and India to tackle abuses. The EU's shortcomings in foreign policy, such as its failed attempt at mediating the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh region and its annexion regarding the Israel and Gaza, also mar its reputation as a supporter of human rights.
Additionally, the EU's migration policies have contributed to much suffering and human rights abuses, as the death toll of those trying to reach EU territory has reached more than 2,500 in 2023. The EU's newly signed deal with Tunisia to reduce the number of migrants embarking on the dangerous route to Europe across the Mediterranean is regarded as controversial not only because of Tunisia's abusive treatment of sub-Saharan migrants, including illegal pushbacks, racial hatred, and human rights violations. With this deal, the EU is turning a blind eye to the repression of human rights and other human costs. This concludes this week's Human Rights News. For further human rights updates and news, please follow us on our social media channels.